Hello and welcome to the November 6th edition of the Bubb Report. I am the Bubb Report's assistant producer, Rion Charles. This week, we discuss the outcome of the Judy Benoa versus Government of Grenada litigation with one of the parties whose dispute with the Parliamentary Elections Office in 2013 came up in written and oral arguments before the court. Last week, former public servant Judy Benoa found favor with the OECS Supreme Court when Justice Glasgow ruled that her dismissal on October 1st, 2013 was in breach of natural justice. In the court transcript, Benoa noted that in a September 30th, 2013 meeting with the Governor General, she was asked to clarify her positions concerning her decision to unilaterally change the party symbol designation of Glennis Roberts' party, the National United Front. The symbol requested was a traditional family. The symbol assigned, however, was the dove. Benoa was also quizzed on her refusal to implement the e-government for integration project by the central government in several constituencies across the state. We hear Glennis Roberts' take on the outcome of the case. Last week, the government of Grenada held a town hall meeting in the south of the island to appraise the national community on the priority areas for the upcoming national budget, which will be read and debated from December 7th. But while he and his team wanted to shore up his administration's vision for transformation, he also used the national platform as the basis for telegraphing allegations of impropriety and corruption by the previous NNP regime. He cited the faith organization for the wastage of government funds given to it for facilitating pandemic-related services.
Between 2020 and July of 2022, this company was paid $6.8 million by the government of Grenada. Now, in addition to that, the then cabinet of Grenada passed a cabinet resolution handing over 3 community centers located in St. Andrews Southeast to that same organization. Community centers meant for the community, meant for use of the people, was handed over to this company.
He also made claims of the improper handling of the sale of a diplomatic passport to a Polish national, though not revealing the diplomat's name.
He was told that in order to do so, he needed to pay US $290,000. $150,000 was paid to the state of Grenada, and there's a treasury receipt for it. Another $140,000 was paid to the new National Party South St. George office.
He also chided the previous government for moving the budget for Parliament to the Prime Minister's office. For its part, the subject of the Prime Minister's volley, the New National Party, and Faith Organization for Development denied the allegations against them by Grenada's head of government. This week on our program, we will assess last week's town hall meeting in St. George's and the key takeaways that emerged. We welcome our guests, Brigadier General in the U.S. Army, Jennifer Morass-Host, community activist and former MP for the South St. George constituency, Glennis Roberts, former legislator and government minister, Michael Baptiste, entrepreneur and former legislator, Kenny Lausing, and William Joseph, political analyst. Here is our host for this week's program, Dr. Kellon Bubb. We begin with this week's editorial.
A pleasant good morning to our viewers and listeners, and we do apologize for the late start this morning as we were having some technical issues in getting the program started. Now, imagine for a second that the outcome of the June 2022 elections were different, and the new National Party won a third consecutive term in office. one might have argued that the status quo would remain and that issues surrounding the Faith Organization for Development, the diplomatic passport for Polish John Doe scandal, and the glaring conflict of interest of having a constituency office vote under the executive arm of government would not even be on the radar of mainstream media and political narratives. Instead, in this alternate universe, one might still be talking about the pensions committee that the previous administration promised to put in place to address the pension issue, or the safer hands agenda that was envisioned in the last campaign. One of the interesting developments, which did not get significant traction in the plethora of news last week, was the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court of Appeals judgment against a high school teacher at the St. Joseph's Convent, St. George's, whose salary was docked owing to a union-led strike in November of 2018. As a result of this industrial action, the government at the time docked the salaries of the teachers who were involved in the protest over government's 2% gratuity payment offer. In this alternate political universe, the new National Party administration would feel vindicated over the court ruling, and perhaps former Education Minister Emmeline Pear would lead a publicity campaign extolling the rightness and the virtues of a government's decision to dock the teachers' salaries in the first place. The unions, who has had a string of victories at the appellate court level, have not said much about this ruling, since the pensions issue might have taken up all of the oxygen in the room, or the olive branch of repayment of the salaries by the Deacon Mitchell administration upon their assumption of office, in fact, sort of made this issue a moot point. But the Glasgow judgment in Donna Marcel Lussan versus the Cabinet, the Minister of Finance, and the Attorney General of Grenada says, quote, "For the purpose of the laws of Grenada, and in particular the relationship of employer and employee subsisting between the government and public servants in Grenada, the common law rule of no work, no pay is quite alive. Accordingly, the government was not acting illegally or in violation of Ms. Lussan's constitutional rights when it refused to pay her salary for the days that she did not work," unquote. Glasgow, citing previous Privy Council judgments on the matter, such as Sykes versus the Minister of National Security et al., and Miles versus the Wakeville Metropolitan District, said, quote, "There is no obligation anywhere in law or in Ms. Lussan's terms and conditions of employment that obligates the government of Grenada, her employer, to pay her, the employee, for the days that she did not work, or no such law has been shown to me that stipulates or requires that where the government wishes to deduct salary from Ms. Lussan's failure to work, that the employer must engage disciplinary proceedings before deducting sums from her salary," unquote. This judgment certainly raises salient points about the nature of industrial action, which Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell himself weighed in a July 2022 press conference earlier this year. In moving forward, therefore, the unions must be honest with their membership about the risks and benefits of having a strike action in the first place. While strikes are a time-honored bargaining chip in the negotiating toolbox, the labor movement has to realize that one must be clear that it is the job of the unions, through their strike funds, not the employer, to pay their members during industrial action. This issue may just arise again in Grenada, but now we have history and precedent as a guide to determine what successive outcomes will be. And at this time, I wish to welcome our first guest for this morning's program. She is a history-making Grenadian American, and we are very happy to have with us, Brigadier General Jennifer Marast Host of the U.S. Army, who was recently promoted to that position. Brigadier General, congratulations, and we welcome you to the Bubb Report.
Thank you, Kellan. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate being here.
Absolutely. So let us talk about your story. Your story is certainly a quintessential immigrant success story, having grown up in Grenville, St. Andrews in Grenada, having immigrated to the United States, having attended medical school at Rutgers University, and then serving in the U.S. Army to reach to this very historic role of Brigadier General. Talk to us about who Jennifer Marast Host is and how Grenada, your home country, sort of influenced the person that you have become.
So I will tell you, Jennifer Marast Host is a young girl growing up in St. Andrews in Grenville, Salisbury Road, right? Um, Always on the go, a little brownie guide, and I don't know if people remember what the brownie guides are like anymore, but I certainly cherished my foundation in Grenada. I went to RC school and I later went to Methodist school right there. And, those things taught me the value of a solid foundation. I always tell people I will never, ever trade my childhood for anything because Grenada gave me that stability, that drive to just set a goal and drive forward to accomplish it. Um, you know, Through primary school, college, medical school, it's always you set a goal and you go to the goal, right? So you don't get distracted by the obstacles that's on the way. And you just keep your eye on that prize and you go for it. And so I'm enjoying being that young Grenadian, soldier. It's a wonderful experience, and to reach the ranks that I'm at right now, it's amazing to me because over all these years, I was focused on just taking care of service members. And, the rank as a colonel, I was no longer doing clinical work, but more of an administrative goal and work. And it's all about taking care of the people that serve with you, those people that you are their supervisor. So it's about the people. And that has really gotten me here.
Talk to us about your interest in medicine. Where did that interest come from? Were you one of those people who dissected lab rats and animals at a very young age? Did you always have an interest in medicine?
I did. So I love taking things apart and trying to put them back together and see that it works. And that's part of medicine, right? So people get sick and you try to do different things to put them back, make them whole. And I've always, growing up, I was always the one. I went to visit the elderly people on Salisbury Road and just visit with them, talk with them. I think I had more elderly friends than I had younger friends. And I
That is something we have in common as in our growing up stories. Yes.
Yes. So medicine has always been a part of me. Love dissecting things. And, it's been, rats and in college, right? Rats and pigs. And I just love to see how the human body work. Yes.
And talk to us about getting into medical school. Now, I know that usually to get into medical school in the United States, it's a high bar. You have all of these different exams. You have to take the MCAT. It's a cutthroat and competitive process. I happen to know this because one of my best friends, Dr. Terry Christopher, who also attended Rutgers, and I remember when he was in the throes of applying to different medical universities, I started to get headaches because the threshold, the bar is extremely high. It's no easy feat. So talk to us about that process of getting into medicine.
So that is a process that starts from, I would say it really starts from when you're in primary school,
Yeah.
right? Because all of the grades take you to another level. And so going through primary schools, you had to get really good grades. High school, excellent grades. When you got to college, it became a little more focused on the sciences, and you always had to excel. Now, I happen to just love science, right? And biology. And so for me, sitting down and learning all these things and learning them to a excellent standard was fascinating for me. And so when it came time now to apply, and I say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Going to go into medicine, and you do all the applications, and so people see these grades. But what they also want to see is not that you can only study and get good grades. They want to see someone who is kind, someone who has outside interests, not just getting good grades. And so you do a lot of community work, and again, it goes back to my old people friends, right? And just taking care of others and not being just in a bubble. You have to be a global student. So that's and the applications were rigorous. The interviews were even more rigorous, but I got through them, thank God, by the grace of God, and just kind of enjoying the fruits of that labor now.
Absolutely. The military service, obviously, the U.S. Army is an all voluntary organization. It also prides itself on diversity and inclusion in many respects. If you look at the U.S. Army, it's sort of a mini United Nations in many ways. Why did you have an interest in serving at that level?
The interest in serving, I think it always came from just service in general. So giving back to people. So I literally joined because I loved the mission of Army medicine. And that was one way that I was able to give back to the country that took me in as a 10-year-old child, and was able to, go through high school, go through medical college, go through medical school. And I felt a sense of owning and giving back. Also giving back to the country that, helped my parents when they were home. And so it's just a sense of duty. And I think I innately have that sense of duty. And so the military was a great fit for me.
And of course, we know that there is also rigor there. So rigor is something I suspect that you've gotten used to. Talk to us about this promotion that you recently received, and the areas of responsibility that comes with that promotion. Brigadier General is a significant promotion in the U.S. Army, and so talk to us about what that would entail.
So this promotion really, I'm amazed. I am thankful to God for this. This promotion really means for me more responsibility, right? So what this is, I am the deputy commanding to the 807th Medical Command Deployment Support. So I am the advisor to the commanding general on everything medical, all things medical. I'll also be responsible for two brigades that has approximately 55 units that's dispersed over 9 states with approximately 4,000 soldiers. And in doing that, I am advising them on medical matters. They are responsible for hospitalization, they're responsible for dental, combat operational stress control, preventative medicine. Uh, they're responsible also for medical logistics. How do we get our medications, throughout the United States as well as abroad? A plethora of different medical aspects that I will be advising them on.
Mhm. Now, in looking at your resume, I saw that you served, you were deployed overseas. I saw Kuwait on your resume. I saw Afghanistan. I saw, I believe, Iraq as well. Yes.
Correct.
And so obviously you would have served, you served on the front lines in places that army servicemen experienced significant battle challenges. Do you remember a time, or can you tell us a story, of course, unclassified, of particular challenges that you face in having to tend to servicemen in one of those countries?
Let's see, challenges it is, the American people, uh, really trust us to be able to execute the duties that we're assigned. So as a physician, out in these different locations, when we have to tend to service members who have been injured, on days where we have a lot of injuries, that can become very a toll on you because it's back to back or multiple, what we call mass casualties, where multiple soldiers are coming in, service members are coming in that are injured. Some are, some do not survive their injuries, others are very critically injured. And so those days can absolutely weigh on you. But you have to really say, you know what? I was placed in this position because I have these skills as an emergency medicine physician. And through God, I'm going to use these skills and help out all of our service members. So we take care of Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, all of it. And so those are challenging days when you realize that you have service members that are not going to be able to go home and hug their loved ones. And you feel that, right? Because at the end of the day, even though we compartmentalize to be able to take care of our service members, but you're still human, and you feel those losses. Yes.
Absolutely, and one of the things that is a very somber, solemn, and very difficult ritual in many respects is when families of servicemen are greeted, their caskets are greeted at different Air Force bases across the country. Whatever one thinks about the U.S. military role, that's not your role here, of course, but there is something somber about that. And every time I see that, I just think about people like yourself who have to deliver that sad news to servicemen and women at the front lines. Let us talk about family. Who I know one of your uncles, I believe, that's Ken. All of your uncles, as a matter of
Yes.
fact, uh, they are my brothers because they attended our high school presentation college. Talk to us about the role that family played in shaping who you are.
Family is everything, I will tell you. Over the years, sometimes you get a little bit too busy, but you always know that you have that family foundation to support you, right? My husband, Chris, and my son, Justin, I will tell you, without their love and support, and without them picking up the slack at home, right? Because sometimes I'm sometimes deployed for 9, 10 months. Sometimes I'm busy with meetings. If they didn't pick up the slack at home, I couldn't do what I have done. I could not accomplish what I have done. And so just having that family support, and that family is there, my extended family with my uncles and my aunts, Kenny and Ken and Rawl, and it's just it's an amazing feeling to know that I still have that culture, right? That Grenadian culture, Caribbean culture that I can rely on. And we all pitch in and help each other.
The idea of the village, I don't think it ever gets away from us. Our accomplishments are not only ours, but it's a reflection of the village, the villages and the families that raised us as well.
It certainly is. And so, this weekend with my promotion, all my family was there. My village was there, right?
Mhm.
And I consider part of my village the soldiers that I lead and the soldiers who fell underneath my command. And so we were all there together, because most times you don't get to bring your two villages to meet at one place. So at least this time, my village of my soldiers, my village of my family, we were all together celebrating this promotion, because I look at this promotion as their accomplishment as well,
Mhm.
right? It is because of them that I stand here today.
Mhm. Absolutely. We have some comments from that are coming in. A lot of people are absolutely very proud of what you've been able to accomplish. Congratulations, my sister, for ranking up in that position in the U.S. Army, because we know it's a place where blacks seem to be discriminated against a lot, and being black is not easy in the USA in general. The viewers on this program tend to be uncharacteristically blunt. We have another viewer here saying she got her hands full because she knows what she wanted in life. A Grenadian here is throwing out a challenge. Hopefully, when your tenure in the army is over, can you return home and be a teacher, mentor to young Grenadian girls?
Absolutely. My mom still lives in Grenada, right?
Yeah.
And so she comes up every year and we'll bring her back down. But I would love to come to Grenada and be a mentor, be a teacher for others on the island. Uh, just, hey, invite me down. I'll be there.
Giving back is so important. And finally, what would you say to a young Grenadian girl who might be listening to this program about their dreams and aspirations for the future?
I will tell you, whatever your dream is, go for it. Do not let anything limit you. Now, in order to go for it, you have to provide that foundation. So you have to do all of the things that everyone else has to do, and you have to do it 10% better. You have to do things that will make you stand out. You cannot be on the same platform with everyone else because you have to rise above everyone else. You also have to know how to play well with others. This is what I call it, right? You can't take your toys in the sandbox and say these are my toys and no one else is going to play with it. You have to be able to play well with others, and you have to understand the need to get to yes. So, in medicine, there's different commands. They're always asking you, can you do this? Can you do that? Now, some of the things I immediately know, I can't do that, right? But I say, you know what? Let me get back to you. Let me look into it. And you try to figure out how you can get to yes. So do the schooling that you need, provide that foundation, okay? And keep your eye on your goal because that's your goal.
Mhm.
Play well with others and try to figure out how to get to yes. And that gets you very far.
Absolutely. Is there another Grenadian brigadier, Grenadian American Brigadier General that you're aware of, or are you the first? I suspect you might be the first.
I am the first
Yeah.
Brigadier General of Grenadian descent. Um, I'm also the first African American female Army Reserve Medical Corps Brigadier General.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for that. Any final words and comments from you before we get to the next segment of the program?
Just for everyone, thank you so much for the support. I absolutely love my Caribbean family out there. And set your eye on the goal and go for it. Don't look at the obstacles. Don't keep saying, I can't, I can't. There's no reason why you can't. You can do it. And you set that goal and you will do it. So go for it.
Brigadier General, congratulations again on your promotion, and certainly we thank you for appearing on the Bubb Report. This is a big deal. We like highlighting stories of positive Grenadian American immigrants who are making a difference not only for themselves but in the lives of others. It's always about giving back and paying it forward. If you can't pay it forward, then what really is your contribution on Earth? That's what I always say. So thank you so much, Brigadier General. I keep saying Lieutenant. Thank you again for appearing on the Bubb Report.
Thank you, Kellan, for having me.
Absolutely. Our viewers and listeners, that was Brigadier General Jennifer Morass Host, a history-making Grenadian American who made history for herself by being promoted to Brigadier General. She originally hails from the town of Grenville in St. Andrew, the Salisbury Road community there in Grenville, St. Andrew. So we thank her for appearing on the program. Now, the next segment of the Bubb Report comes to you compliments S.A. Johnson Funeral Home. They are a Caribbean family-owned funeral service. They offer a full range of funeral services at affordable prices in New York City. They can be reached on 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity. Stand by, folks. We will be back with the panel segment of the week.
Fraud charges brought against Baptiste by the Commissioner of Police has everyone talking. And as we would discover in this evening's Focal Point program, there are still a number of unanswered questions surrounding his recent arrest.
Ready to face them.
We are prepared to meet them on all battlefields. In the streets, on the television, in the law courts, everywhere. No stone shall be left unturned.
In our estimation, there was a case to go to the court in relation to Mr. Baptiste. That's precisely what we're doing.
Don't bother me with this NDC propaganda. I have a lot of work to do. People calling me NDC propaganda name. They want to read the headlines talking about this case. So what do you really want me to say here? I said openly, already, over and over, I repeat tonight. I hope nobody told me here. The cabinet made a decision. The gentleman agreed to pay my bills. I spent my money, he agreed to pay me back. I collected my money. So if he takes it, and he gets it, you worry about it. But if it's not money, I have to take it. So when I bring it in, you can't be sure I collected my money. So bring it in. I only saw it didn't give me more. I don't saw it. I hope that's communicated.
Very proud of what you're doing, and I think it's much needed. So thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you again for watching the Bubb Report. Viewers and listeners, we want to thank you sincerely. Ashley, thank you so very much. Senator Chester Humphrey, welcome to the Bubb Report. Mr. Mitchell, welcome to the program. The Honorable Jumani Williams, we call him Jumani, who is the public advocate for the city of New York. The Honorable Baptiste Pandey, former Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Pandey, welcome to the Bubb Report of Grenada. The Honorable Tobias Clement. Mr. Clement, welcome to the Bubb Report. Is it Nicolai or Nikolai? I hope I pronounced it.
Nikolai.
It's Nikolai. Thank you.
Yes.
And welcome to the program, Her Excellency Ambassador Luan Gilchrist. Mr. Randall Robinson, you are here in your private capacity and in your personal capacity. Yesterday, we learned that you were detained by law enforcement in Grenada. So you come from a family of public servants.
Yes, we are a family of public servants.
You're saying that you have to do more, but my question is, what have you done as President of the Union to ensure that that happens?
To the cards that I have drawn that I am the minister at this point in time. And for members of the
But
public,
you're also a servant of the people. Why would we have ambassadors representing the state that do not understand clearly what their terms of reference are? And welcome back, folks. Now, for the next segment, we will unpack and dissect the recently held town hall meeting in Grandance in Grenada in the context of allegations of public impropriety and corruption. Now, allegations of impropriety and public corruption in public office in Grenada is nothing new. Before independence, and when Grenada was still an associated ward of their colonial masters, a commission of inquiry was set up in January 1962 to investigate a scandal involving grift and the misappropriation of public funds, as well as public intimidation by the then Premier, Eric Gairy, who was not knighted at the time, but he was Eric Gairy at the time. The commissioners found that Gairy, who was also finance minister, engaged in financial mismanagement and wasteful expenditure. The Squandermania affair, as it is known in history. Frank MacDonald, a British journalist, writing on the Squandermania affair, said in 1969, quote, "There was no doubt in anyone's mind that Gairy's regime was a corrupt one. For starters, the first thing he did in 1960 was to replace every bit of furniture in Government House. Among one of his purchases was a grand piano, which cost the Grenadian taxpayer $3,000. Now imagine what $3,000 in 1960 would be today. Fast forward to post-independence Grenada. Both former Prime Ministers Tillman Thomas and Dr. Keith Mitchell were the subjects of public scrutiny over clandestine donations and gifts meant for the state. In the case of Thomas, he allegedly received $50,000 from a private donor. The nation only found out about that donation after a bank employee blew the whistle on the transaction in 2012. In the case of Dr. Mitchell, a commission of inquiry was charged with investigating a claim that he allegedly accepted a briefcase containing $500,000 in exchange for granting diplomatic status to an unsavory international businessman. The Cheltenham inquiry, established in August 2004, heard testimony from a handful of witnesses involved with Mitchell's trip abroad in 2000, when it was alleged that he accepted the bribe from Eric Restainer, who is now in jail. It was also alleged that the transaction was taped. An NDC apologist at the time promised to release the tape. No tape was ever publicly released to the nation. One of our guests, Michael Baptiste, was also the target of a criminal probe in 2003, when he was charged with fraud and accused of pocketing over 208,000 EC dollars worth of government funds. The official police charge detailed 3 counts of fraudulent breach of trust. According to the charge sheet, Baptiste may have been involved in these acts between 1997 and 1999, when he was Minister of Agriculture under the NNP administration. Panelists, we wish to welcome you for this very interesting program. Now, we also have with us a former MP for the constituency of South St. George, Ms. Glennis Roberts. Glennis, we will be getting to you after this segment because we certainly want to get your comments on the recent judgment with respect to the Judy Benoa matter. So thank you for joining us. But of course, if you want to chime in on this issue, you can as well, although that was not the arrangement that we made with you. And we have the rest of the panelists here, Mr. William Joseph and Mr. Kenny Lal Singh. Mr. Kenny Lal Singh, of course, in teeing up this segment, what I forgot to mention is that you were also fired for allegations of impropriety when you were a former junior minister of education under the first NNP administration between 1984 to to 1999. But panelists, we welcome you all to the Bubb Report.
Thank you so much.
I see. We are here to have lunch again. We're here to have lunch. Mr. Lal Singh, I believe this is your first time appearing with Mr. Baptiste and Mr. William Joseph, but it has become a tradition on the Bubb Report that whenever these two gentlemen are on the program, we actually have a buffet-style type of conversation. So shall we begin with the starters? Shall we begin with the starters? Who wants to?
Well, since I'm the only, I don't think I've been charged with anything of the kind.
No, you've not. You're not part of that club.
I pray for my brothers and friends that they won't be charged recklessly going forward. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, good morning, panel. And so I want to open this conversation by getting your reaction to just your gut reaction to the town hall that we saw unfold in St. George's last week. Who wants to begin? Mr. Lal Singh, did you have a chance to listen to the town hall in its entirety?
Yeah, good morning to the panelists and good morning to all your listeners.
Absolutely, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be on your program, but just two items before I comment. One is to publicly congratulate Brigadier General Jennifer Morass on a great achievement. I smiled a lot when she was talking about her lifestyle and how she developed into who she is today. And I believe more young Grenadians need to hear her story to see if we can change the culture in Grenada and improve our young people by helping them to develop their minds and their culture in what they want to be. So she's a great, in my opinion, great inspiration to all Grenadians, all young people in general. And I hope the government would see it fit to invite her to publicly come and speak to schools and young people at schools. Secondly, yes, I was fired by Mr. Blaze because I challenged him on his style of leadership. And then they created a story that I took cement. And yes, I took it and I did community work. But they really wanted to get at me because I challenged him. So they had a political investigation and the report went back that everything I took from the Ministry of Works went on projects. And that was the end of the story. So I was just like usual, during the PRG days, I was locked up for nothing, but I spent 2 years in jail. During Mr. Blaze's period, I was kicked out.
So you admit, in retrospect, you admit taking the semen, but I believe the issue was, and yes, you said you used it for community service. The issue was, I believe, part of that in my own research. I'm subject to correction because these were extemporaneous accounts by a journalist at the time who wrote this story that appeared in the United Press International. But I believe the process by which the semen was taken was not followed properly. Is that accurate? Is that inaccurate?
I requested it from the Ministry of Works, and it was given. I didn't go and take it myself physically. I made a request. I put in a number of projects, self-help projects, as we called it in the 80s. I put in the request, and it was given. The people collected it, and it went to the various projects.
Okay.
This is why nothing came out of it.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. So when you hear the town hall meeting that we heard, I hope that last week, yes,
clears the matter.
Well, yes, absolutely. I believe you've cleared that up because, of course, it's always good to get your side of the story. The town hall. your gut reaction to it.
Yeah, well, I listened to Town Hall, and I believe the Town Hall was more politics than anything else. In my opinion, if there are misappropriation in, as the Prime Minister have said in many cases, I don't believe that should be disclosed at a Town Hall meeting. I believe that the FIU and the legal people and the police should get involved, and the findings should be made known. But that was never done before, and it was just brought to the public generally by the Prime Minister at a Town Hall meeting.
Well, except the Prime Minister, except if I may, Mr. Lassing, the Prime Minister did say that the matter has been referred for investigation.
Well, why?
So can't two things? But can two things be true?
Why bring it to the public when you have not investigated yet? Mm-hmm. Let's suppose what he's saying there is no legal bearings to take legal action, then it becomes political. So I believe it is a cart before the horse. Now, I am not protecting anybody. Anyone who do anything wrong, in my opinion, should be dealt with. So if the NNP has done anything wrong, but we have not gotten the full story. Now, if a gentleman has paid for a diplomatic passport and there was a cabinet conclusion, so be it, then nothing is wrong with it because they continue to sell passports up to today. Now, if somebody gave contributions to the new national party and he goes to the party, I don't believe anything is wrong with that because political parties in Grenada are not business institutions. They don't know how to raise money other than begging for money and receiving money. All of them. They all beg and people would give them donations. So nothing is wrong with the donation because they all do it.
Mr. Joseph, the theory of the case here is that there is nothing wrong with a donation to the New National Party and its party office ostensibly in the south of the island. There is nothing wrong. This is just all politics.
Yeah.
What say you?
Well, thanks a lot and good morning again. I want to comment though very briefly by making 2 or 3 very quick points to put this thing in context. Right? I believe we are in a time that calls for big political and patriotic thinking. That's the times that we find ourselves in. We have to shift the needle in terms of our discourse in the politics. That is my view. Second point quickly is to say that we have an opportunity today that is the original opportunity upon independence, and that is to provide leadership and development for this little country. And we're there. The third quick point I would say is this, that the NDC administration, this current administration, is going to find itself the most scrutinized regime in our history. And that is a function of the times. It is a function of the times and how young people in particular engage in political activity. And of course, as you know, we are led by young people generally. So let me come to the town hall. Listen, with respect, a town hall is a political event. I don't know that one needs to pick and choose what is presented there, except to say that one would expect a prime minister addressing the nation. It's a town hall event, but it is addressing the nation, right? It is a political relationship between government and people. So in that, one might find some accounting of what the government has met, what they are doing, and of course the opportunity for people to engage with their representatives. So it's a political event. I would not expect the Prime Minister, or indeed any other minister, participating in a town hall to speak recklessly of this and that and the other. So let me make a final point for the time being on this. I have not heard, and I don't know why folks are insinuating that there was any contribution to the NNP party. No one, I have not heard that from any context. People are assuming that. They're assuming two things: contribution to the NNP, and they're also assuming campaign financing. None of those things have met the record. So I don't think
except no, Mr. Joseph, I'm sorry, but we are going on the Prime Minister's utterances that based on a contemporaneous account that monies were paid for the passport, and the other parts of those funds were then also donated to the New National Party, which they have also denied.
Yes, but
so
you see,
I'm not following your trend of thought.
To say that money is donated to the party is not to say that it has anything to do with campaign financing, and equally, it might when found out, it might hardly have to do anything at all with contribution to the party. We might be dealing with a conduit. So I would urge all of us to be very assume or even argue and contend that A, campaign financing, and B, is contribution to the NNP. It may well not be so at all. So we have to wait on that latter evidence.
Mm-hmm. Let us bring in Mr. Baptiste. Mr. Baptiste, let's get your gut reaction to the town hall last week. And of course, in doing the research for this program, I had to go back into history to the time when you were arrested by the New National Party for allegations of corruption as well. Of course, nothing came out of that matter. Some might say that was also political. So do you see any parallels here with what is happening now?
Well, first, let me thank you for having me on the program. I want to also say a very, very pleasant morning to my good sparring partner there, Willie, and of course, Kenny, a man who I have a lot of respect for, both as a businessman, a successful politician, and a patriot. And of course, going into my matter, first let me say there was no denial on my part that I received the funds. As the commissioner, the whaling commissioner, it was my job to travel around the world in whaling meetings and to look after Grenada's interests in the Whaling Commission. The International Whaling Commission was having a meeting in Grenada, the plenary session. I invited them to host that meeting in Grenada, because in traveling to these meetings, I saw thousands of people traveling to this meeting, and I thought it was a good meeting for tourism. So I invited the IWC to host the meetings in Grenada. And then they had an intersessionary meeting, a small meeting before the main event. And I invited them to host that in Grenada as well. And they agreed. They said, good, change the environment. Now, in these meetings, the host government would usually host a function for the delegates coming into that meetings. And on the side of it, you will have the whaling commissioner for that respective country hosting his own meetings and his own events. In Grenada case, I invited over 11 ministers in countries participating in the IWC to visit Grenada. And I sent a special invitation to 7 members of parliament in Japan to come to Grenada. At the time, I was negotiating for the Ganitang Road to be listed as a fisheries access road, and the Grenville fish market to be incorporated as into one project. It met some resistance in the cabinet in Japan. So having the opportunity now to host that whaling meeting in Grenada, I decided to invite these members of parliament to come to Grenada to see for themselves what it was, and they came. they had the meeting. The government of Grenada hosted the reception at the trade center, the official government meeting, and I, as the commissioner, hosted my own function in Funtown, in my building in Funtown. It was then I sought assistance from donors for the purpose of hosting the meetings, because the activities that I was hosting at that meetings was as such, I could not ask government to sponsor event where I was bringing in entertainers from Trinidad. I mean, let's face it, punch girls, and inviting escorts from the Dominican Republic to come into Grenada to entertain some of these guests that I was bringing into Grenada. So I went out and I sought contributions from donors, and it was well received, and I got the funds into my account. When I fell out with the New National Party, and I fell out with them when they released Felix Code, I stood up in the parliament then and I said that the government was lying to the Grenadian people when they said Felix Code was going to England for medical treatment. I said, no, that's a lie. I'm not going to buy that. Mike Tyson, who is not a criminal, he couldn't enter into England because of a rape conviction he had. And Felix Code, who was then a convicted murderer, I was challenging the government. I said, no, I can't sell that story. So I said so in Parliament. And by the time I got home, I got a call from the Prime Minister. He called me and he said, well, you've been acting as opposition here, and we made a statement, the people believe it, and here you are raising up things that should be left alone. I asked the Governor General to revoke your appointment, but if you behave yourself, we would bring you back into government. And that is where all hell broke loose with me and him. I couldn't tell you the exchange now. I couldn't tell you that on air. So he came on, and then I said I'd be happy to take on the role as leader of the opposition. So I did. I immediately went to the GG, took my oath, and started the crusade as leader of Her Majesty's opposition. And I started uncovering lots of corruptions into the government. And one of them was the Van Brink matter, the briefcase matter, the stadium, and many, many others, the Dunfermline housing project. I was bringing news on the table to the people, and the call center. I investigated the call center viciously. I stake out Simmons, where the call center was. After hearing the Prime Minister coming into Parliament and suspending Section 8 of the Finance and Audit Act and making monies available to the call center, I stake out the Simmons Pavilion, the Simmons Industrial Park. I stake out there several nights to see who were the players involved in that. And lo and behold, I saw Mr. Dennis Campbell and other members of the Prime Minister's family going into that facility. It was there and then I recognized that the call center was a fake, was a fraud. It was Dr. Mitchell's way of suspending the Finance and Audit Act to enable government to pump millions of dollars into Dr. Mitchell's family. And I broke the story in the Parliament. And he was embarrassed when I broke the story. And under pressure from your humble servant, I got him to admit, yes, members of his family is involved, and that come March of 2001, his family will start paying back the monies. And that became a scandal for him. And I kept on the story. And I kept on opening up and revealing many more wrongdoings, including a $4.5 million cable and wireless dividend that was earmarked for the Consolidated Fund that found its way into paying Dr. Mitchell's family's telephone bill. I broke that story again. It was there and then that Dr. Mitchell decided that, look, I have to get this guy at all costs, because this guy is now reading all my corrupt plays in my corrupt playbook, and I have to get him at all costs. I then received a letter from the Accountant General, Patricia Mark. And in that letter, she said to me, the Japanese government has confirmed that monies were given to me for the government of Grenada, and she was asking me to account for it. I got the letter, I went home and I put it in my copy machine, and I copied it until the ink dried out, because I wanted to make sure that I maintain copy of that letter. And I was wondering, I responded to her and I said, look, what kind of letter is this? How are you asking me to account for something that I know absolutely not? There was no relationship between me and the government of Japan. When the story broke, the government of Japan came out. They denied the story. They said, no, they have nothing to do with it. And they was right. They had nothing to do with it. He had Hugh Wildman as his special prosecutor. The charges were preferred against me. And I stood up in open court and I taunted Dr. Mitchell. And I told him to come with it and come with it. I'm ready to face the charges. For a good 8 months, I was running in and out of the court, and the matter couldn't call. It was there and then we learned that Dr. Mitchell, unable to provide the evidence in the courts, he summoned the chief magistrate, Miss Patricia Mark, and he told Miss Patricia Mark that, look, there's a case in Grenville against Baptiste. I want you to go to Grenville and send that matter in the High Court. I have a judge in the High Court waiting for him, and I want you to assist me with that. Patricia Mark refused. She said, if there is any evidence against Michael Baptiste, that matter would reach the High Court. He fired Miss Patricia Mark. So that case went nowhere, and he kept on and on and on and on until the Director of Public Prosecution, Mr. Christopher Nelson, stepped in and dismissed all the charges on the ground that the likelihood of a conviction is very, very, very unlikely. And he made other statements that it was unconscionable to prefer charges against a public official without any chance of prosecution. So clearly, my matter there was malicious prosecution, to say the very least. But the objectives were met because it damaged my reputation. And in a constituency where I was unbeaten, I lost the election that time. So that's how.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let us segue into the current zeitgeist with respect to the allegations that are being made against Faith Organization. I'll bring in the rest of the panel here. Faith Organization for Development. Now, Faith is saying that the numbers that were cited at the town hall meeting actually adds up, that in fact, every penny can be accounted for. If you look at the salaries that were paid, if you look at the supplies that were purchased for the services that they provided, that everything adds up. Now, the other side is saying that that amount, that insurmountable amount, that amount is just insurmountable for a non-for-profit organization whose client, the only client that they serviced was the government of Grenada. And the argument could be made that perhaps it was set up for that purpose. There is also allegations of former Education Minister Emmeline Pear's involvement in that organization as well. So you have Faith. Then you have CJ's Managerial Services. Now this is a very interesting one, because here you have a situation which Tobias Clement actually raised, but of course he did not necessarily get into the weeds about whether or not that there was a managerial service provider for constituency offices in the country. That vote was removed from Parliament and is under the arm of the executive branch of government. And then the passport issue. Let us dissect them one by one. Faith, gentlemen, who wants to take a stab at that? The allegations. Mr. Lansing, I will start with you, of course.
Yeah, well, I've heard the allegation, but again, there is not enough information given to the public. So, because you're getting a story from both sides, but I believe if there is concrete evidence that there was corruption regarding Faith and the government of Grenada, then the matter should be pursued. All at this time now, what we're hearing is trivial information, and you're hearing it on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Really and truly, the public is not getting down and getting the meat of those issues. And again, I would repeat, what we heard in the town hall meeting, in my opinion, was just politics. I believe
you've said that, Mr. Lansing. If I may, what do you think needs to happen such that we get to a place where either side either side would present their story of it, and the government is saying that this is what the faith organization has alleged to do. Faith is saying, how do we get to a place where we can have a full accounting? In previous administrations, we've had commissions of inquiry. Now we're going to have an investigation, of course. But do you think that that would really get to the bottom of things?
The Prime Minister is a learned legal man, and I believe he knows what to do. If, in his opinion, there is evidence of corruption, send it to the FIU and the police and investigate it properly, and then come to the public with the findings. But if you don't do that, then it is just politics. I mean, as I see.
Okay, Faith, Mr. Joseph, Faith.
Yes, thank you. It is politics, and it's more than that. And I think we ought to reckon with it. And we need to put on the table too the press release that organization published.
Mm-hmm. I think we are having some technical difficulties there with Mr. Joseph. But let's get to Mr. Baptiste. Mr. Baptiste,
in its own.
Yeah, we're having some technical difficulties with William. But Mr. Baptiste, Faith.
Well, before I get into Faith, let me address the question of the town hall meeting. I listened to the Prime Minister, and very eloquently, the Prime Minister said, there is a receipt from the Treasury for $150,000 from a gentleman who made application to the government for a passport and some posting. And that was clear. And then he went on to say that $140,000 was deposited in the South St. George constituency office. I don't believe you can marry the two. And here's my reasoning. The cabinet conclusion states $290,000. The gentleman paid $150,000 to the state of Grenada. Therefore, that gentleman is owing the people and the government of Grenada $140,000. Now, if the NNP was successful in winning the last general elections, we would not have that discussion, because clearly that money would have been discounted from the remainder of what the gentleman is supposed to pay. I didn't see a crime committed there, because the constituency office did not give the gentleman a receipt. The constituency office did not operate on behalf of the government of Grenada. The $140,000 that was given to the constituency office is an investment that this man made in the elections in Grenada. And that's what he did. He took a gamble. And this gentleman he's a straight man. He didn't give them $200,000. He gave them the remainder of what he's supposed to be paying for the passport. I would have thought that the Prime Minister would have said to the gentleman in correspondence that as far as the government of Grenada is concerned, there's a cabinet conclusion where you ought to pay $290,000. We have a receipt for $150,000. And if you want that conversation or the transaction to continue, you will now have to pay the government of Grenada the remaining $140,000 as stated on that cabinet conclusion. You cannot relate $140,000 of this man's money to a constituency office and say that that is the remainder for the passport. He did not, in his utterances, he made no mention of a receipt from a constituency office. All he's saying is that there is a balance due of $140,000. But the Prime Minister, who is a very intelligent and a learned member, should use that opportunity to set up an inquiry involving forensic auditors. And he now has a link. The Prime Minister should now go back and look at all the dealings of the New National Party selling passports. It did not start with this Polish gentleman. Eric Steiner told the world, and he recorded Dr. Mitchell when he said he gave $500,000 in St. George's. And he invited Dr. Mitchell, that's what he said, to come to his home to collect the remainder of the $500,000. There was no record of that $500,000 that Eric Steiner gave, that claim that he gave the Prime Minister in St. George's. There is no record of that in the Treasury. So now we have a starting point where we can say, look, that is the behavioral pattern of the government, where they either all goes to another place other than the consolidated fund, or now we saw where partial payment were made to the Treasury, and another part which can represent the remainder of the balance due went to a constituency office. You can't marry those two. You could use that gentleman to give you important evidence as to the conversations and to the people involved as to who created the opportunity for him to deposit that money into the constituency fund. He may have some very good information. You can give him immunity. I was expecting the Prime Minister to hold this man tight, give him immunity, and allow him to relate to you the workings of how and who are the players, because there are other players involved that we're not hearing about. You cannot say because the man gave $140,000 to the constituency branch, there is no room there for prosecution. All it is that the Polish citizen have gambled. He has gambled by giving monies to a place other than the official place where he gave the $150,000. He gambled, and he knew well what he was doing. If the NNP had won the elections, he would just blink and collect his passport, and no one would hear anything. So there's need now for a forensic auditor to start an investigation. It's not just in the passport. We have instances of loan guarantee.
Let's take a pin there, Mr. Baptiste. Let's take a pin. I believe we're able to get William back. William, the internet, I hope it stabilizes. But let us get your thoughts. Your trend of thought was interrupted by bad connection. But Faith, we wanted to get to your gut reaction to the Faith.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yes.
In fact, I was about to say that that situation is a very interesting one. And generally, I think we should all, say to ourselves that the Prime Minister would not disclose everything. He has chosen to say some things. The things he said, I believe, would not necessarily reflect the totality of what he knows or what he proposes to do. Okay, so I think we should give that some consideration. The second point I would make is that you look at the faith organization issue. The Prime Minister made some statements. The faith organization responded by way of a press release. So at least those two things are in the public domain. And if one were to analyze the release put out by the faith organization, there are some aspects of it tie into suggestions or insinuations planted by the Prime Minister. You have here a special purpose vehicle created especially for the purpose of hiring people. And in fact, what they've said in their statement is that they were found by the government. Effectively, the government pursued them and said, we have hundreds of vacancies. Find people to do them. Now, these things ring a bell. They make us uncomfortable. The cabinet then proceeds to sole source. So you're talking about millions of dollars to be committed and spent, and you just go in a corner and you pick a group that has no record in recruitment as a recruitment agency. So they created hurriedly and so on, and you line them up and you sign contracts. Okay, so you have that in that pre-selection by the government. Now, every time we talk about cabinet decisions, we should bear in mind that the most critical aspect is what precedes that, the submission. A, what is contained in the submission, and B, which minister put the matter before the cabinet. Very, very important. So that in this problem with the faith organization, was it the Minister for Social Services? Was it the Minister for Health? Was it the Prime Minister himself? Or was it Minister Emmeline Pear who brought the submission? So I'm pointing to something. There is a case of direct evidence and the case also of the smoking gun. So when in the statement, I'm going to finish in a second, when in the statement put out by the faith organization, they say all of these fluffy things that they've said, and then says, there's a provision in our agreement, in our contract for dispute settlement. And they say, hundreds of poor people have been deprived and so on and so on and so on. It might well be true, but those hundreds of poor people may not represent the totality of the spend. So you see, some of that money, not all of that money, I would assume, was going on hiring these people. Now, the last point, you have a dispute settlement provision, but every contract would typically have a termination clause. And if they didn't cite it in their statement, in their press release, and if one was not put in there, then one would obviously be implied. Because if you have a fundamental change in government policy, or the government no longer has the finances to pay on the program, very, very good grounds for bringing the contract to an end. It seems to me that there was a fundamental change in government policy and as a context in which that thing was brought to an end. Now, this issue of whether there's corruption involved and so on, those things have to be worked out. They must be examined. I agree with the panelists. They must be worked out. And what the Prime Minister has done, in my view, is to signal something. Is it political? Yes, it is political. Is it reckless? No, it's not reckless. So that's my comments.
It's not reckless. Very interesting there. Let's get Mr. Baptiste here. Mr. Baptiste, faith. You segued into the other part of it, but you did not address faith yet.
Well, the question of faith, and I heard Willie mention the presenter of the cabinet of the submission, and as Kenny, who also sat in cabinet, would agree that submission could be both written or it could be oral submission. But once it gets into the cabinet and cabinet agrees on it, it's no longer a question of who brought the submission. It's a question of a collective responsibility, including all the members present in that sitting. And I have to go back again. Since the episode with Dr. Mitchell been videotaped collecting that money from Eric Steiner.
Well, except Mr. Baptiste, I'm sorry, on that videotape, no videotape came forward. I covered that as a young reporter. And I remember the New Today, I believe that they were subject of suit as a result of that allegation of a tape. No tape was presented.
Let me qualify that. The Prime Minister went on trial. The Prime Minister was on trial in federal courts in the United States for the same thing. He was on trial. And he had the opportunity to stand in open court and said, I'm not guilty. Instead of that, he hid behind head of state and ask the United States government to give him immunity. So the statements that I'm making here, it's easy for me to make those statements. If I said there was a videotape, all he needed to do was to stand it on 26 Federal Plaza and tell the world, I am not guilty. He didn't do so. He chose to ask for immunity from prosecution. When you ask for immunity from prosecution, you're saying that you're mindful that the outcome of the trial could land you or could take away your civil liberties. So please, I understand you made it here, but there's something greater than that. Not in Grenada, but in the United States. I was in the court. Judge Friedman asked that when he's no longer prime minister to bring him back. So let's proceed on the faith.
Yes, faith. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Now, since the Eric Christina thing, Dr. Mitchell have learned a lot from that. They have found new ways of how to get monies across to whatever activities they may want to. And faith could very well be one of those organizations. And they have found a legal way to channel money from the consolidated fund to the pet projects where there is no accountability. The faith said, the charter said, non-profit. So here it is, they're covering under that. And hence the reason why I'm saying again that this new government must put together a team of experts in the field of forensic auditing to investigate all of this, whether it is his foundation, whether it is faith, whether it is the sale of diplomatic passports. The time has come where we must stop talking and put together a team of experts to investigate all these outstanding matters. And I was saying before I got cut off, it is not just the passport. The passport was just one of them. All the senseless guarantees. There's a man who left Grenada with $55 million. We did not hear the government of Grenada invoke the MLOT Treaty, which we signed in the United States, and the MLOT Treaty is the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, which the Attorney General in the United States and the Attorney General in Grenada corresponds, and they could help each other in cases of crime. We did not hear the New National Party invoke the MLOT Treaty. We did not hear in the E.J. Miller matter, where a $36 million was guaranteed to an investor, where he took all that monies and disappeared. So we were told to believe. The gentleman turned around and sued Grenada, and the government of Grenada put up passive resistance. And why they put up passive resistance? Because they was afraid that E.J. Miller would sing like a canary. So we end up paying the cost for all of these corrupt practices. $55 million disappeared. Neither the FIU nor the government invoked any of the treaties that we have with the United States. We saw we jump up with the Fall Farm in Victoria. That disappeared. We saw a stadium where we didn't know anything about all of these monies that were borrowed, clandestine thing here. It is only when the Taiwanese took the government and people to court, we learned that there is a deal with Taiwan for $36 million. In addition to $100 million that we borrowed from a stadium where the act said, and when the stadium came up in the parliament, he said it would not cost the Grenadian people 1 penny. The stadium fell. We went on to watch the same contractor move into Dumfungling housing project, another corrupt deal, where the same matters were, the same reasoning was advanced in what they call a bolt, buy, on lease transfer. We saw this. We seen the state of Dumfungling housing project today, where raw feces are flowing all over the place. The taxpayers are paying for it. We're looking at Grenville Town today. $3 million were given to a company in Holland to deal with the flooding problem in Grenville and Tantine. The then minister, your namesake, had to hold his nose when he was giving them that check. Go into Grenville today and you'll see that when you have to pass through Grenville Town, you need a boat to get around Grenville. Was there an investigation? The previous NDC came into office and they campaigned and they rode into office and all of these wrongdoings. They got into office and they take the seat and they get comfortable. So we no longer hear about the $55 million where the man disappeared. We're not hearing about Victoria Fall Farm. We're not even hearing about the $3 million that was given to an individual to go to the WTO, to get the WTO to reduce, to increase on the bond rate for poultry products in Grenada. $3 million. When would the Grenadian people be satisfied that they finally get justice for all these wrongdoings? I mean, this new government have to understand that the NNP has a playbook. And if you don't have a copy of the playbook, the corrupt playbook, there are some individuals who have it. George Grant, late George Grant, George Worm, and Sam Clouden. Chester Humphrey had his. He burnt it now. But we could pinpoint to you where all the bodies are buried. So you would know exactly where to look. It is not just one thing. It is a systematic, corrupt practices that happen under the new National Party where taxpayers end up eating the loot. So I am disappointed that the Prime Minister came in, sensationalism, emotionalism, and at the end of it, we have a demoralized society because the public is asking, well, what next? When would the investigation begin? Some even blaming the FIU. The FIU could only act on a genuine complaint from somewhere. And it is the duty of this government now to bring these people to justice, not by town hall meetings. We tired of hearing that. We want to see concrete steps being taken where a genuine investigation is launched and people are called before this investigation. Let me close shortly and give you a little thing here. Leading up to 2008, we highlighted all the wrongdoings of the government, and we have a compilation of it. And I named the people who have a compilation of it. NDC got into government, and here's what they did. Instead of calling Patricia Antwine and the then Accountant General Timothy Antwine, instead of starting an investigation to see how these millions of dollars from taxpayers' money went into Dr. Mitchell's family's account, family's business, where Patricia Antwine was placed there as chairman of the call center, as Accountant General, the person who was supposed to be guarding the public purse was in cahoots with Dr. Mitchell and his family in call center. And when the NDC got in there, what they did? They embraced Patricia Antwine and Timothy Antwine. And they allowed that to go. And the same Patricia Antwine and Timothy Antwine turn around and cut them down and cause them to be out of office. So when I'm hearing about all of this release in town hall meetings, I said, oh my God, not again.
Okay. So your theory of the case is that action needs to be taken in the context of what the wheels of justice and allow the wheels of justice to take its course. Mr. Lalsing, you've heard what this perhaps was a dossier here. This sort of reminded me of Parliament. Mr. Lalsing, I don't know if you ever sat in Parliament with Mr. Baptiste, but he usually gets very animated in Parliament, right? So let's get your thoughts on Mr. Baptiste's theory of the case here. Is that we have these mountains of allegations against the previous administration that were never really acted upon. And he's suggesting that he's a bit disappointed that the new administration seems to be following the same playbook in terms of just talking about it without giving much legal teeth to bringing accountability to these issues. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Mr. Baptiste was very much on point this morning, as always. And he has brought a lot of things back to the table that need to be investigated. And I fully agree with him. Because when you look back at what has happened with the first NDC, they talk, and when they went there, they did nothing except to fight among themselves. And now again, we're back with the same procedure where the new NDC, and I really want to see concrete evidence. There is one of the things that I want to add to what Mr. Baptiste said. I remember Dr. Keith Mitchell fell out with a hotelier under the Citizen by Investment Program, a hotel in the South, where he said the hotelier collected $50 million more than he should have gotten. And he said that in Parliament. Now there's a serious allegation. Dr. Mitchell hasn't done anything about it. I would hope that this new government would investigate whether that is so. Because if there is a program and you collected $50 million more than what you should have, you have robbed the Grenadian people of $50 million US. And I hope, based on what Mr. Baptiste has been saying, that this government would get the act together and seriously investigate what has happened before. But I believe, Kellan, Dr. Bob, we have a serious problem in Grenada. You do not become a good politician and a good minister overnight. Now, what we have faced in Grenada, we are facing Grenada with a new government with no experience from politics nor government. And that is a difficulty the Dick Mitchell administration is facing. He is learning about government and politics. So is everyone near to him. And I expect to see a lot more mistakes being made. But I hope they can curtail mistakes. I hope they can get the act together. I hope they can get the country moving economically as they have promised. But of course, the election brought a lot of surprises. The NNP did not expect to lose. The NDC did not expect to win. But the ball game changed 2 weeks before elections, and the result was a change in government. And like I've said before, you do not become a seasoned politician and a minister and a prime minister overnight, because you do not have that kind of experience. And I've been in many places in management, and I can tell you, you do not get that overnight. So I know the difficulty PM Dick Mitchell is facing. He's in a very difficult position. And then you have a young cadre of ministers. Some of them just got their first job in their life, and they're flexing their muscles. How does he deal with that? So his plate is filled, but we still expect him to perform. Now, what Mr. Baptiste said here this morning, he's the right person to take the right decision to deal with those matters urgently. So the public in Grenada can know who is talking sense, who is fleecing the country, and how we go forward.
Mm-hmm. Now, panel, there is another school of thought here that has been advanced by the other side of the other side, and that school of thought is that bringing up these allegations at the time when it was brought up was meant to sort of distract the national community from some of the errors of the ways of the current NDC administration in terms of governance. We've been hearing allegations, again, unconfirmed allegations. We have no way of confirming or verifying that. In fact, we have been trying to get people to come forward with some of those allegations that I'm going to talk about now. Allegations of concerns that you have ministers of government going to police stations, flexing their muscles there, asking for suspects who are in custody to be released, allegations of bounce checks by a particular MP in the South St. George, Andy Williams, and other allegations that there are some rifts within the organization. And some are saying that that is just sort of a distraction, and giving the base red meat, if you will, is just a way of not wanting to talk about those issues. William, I would begin with you to get your thoughts on that idea.
Yeah, well, thanks again. I don't know that I follow entirely the last bundle of matters you put on the table. Mm-hmm. Some of it, I think, are sourced from, I think you did say, from the other side. Yes. And so it's a political circle, really. So, you know, more of the same, more of the same. But let me just step back briefly and quickly. Now, I agree with Michael about the need for a proper investigation. I disagree with him on the question of the scope of it. Right? In other words, there are some matters that really they have so aged that, in a sense, to really litigate them would hardly make political sense. Some of the players who might well have been guilty are no longer in government and so on and so on. So how far back do we go? But I go with him on the initial thinking that in terms of the current bundle of stuff, the most recent stuff, those call for a proper investigation and so on. The Prime Minister planted a seed. I would insist he has not. I don't hold conversations with him, but I do not imagine that what he said at the town hall represent the totality of what he intends to do about these matters. So let me say this also. I said at the top that this regime is going to be the most scrutinized regime in our post-independence history. And you watch and see what is going to happen. Now, some of us who undertake public commentaries in the public domain might be said, in a sense, to be offering recommendations, suggestions, even perhaps advice to the regime. Now, one of the challenges they face is the extent to which they respond constructively to ideas and suggestions and so on, and even recommendations coming outside of the core. So Mr. Lal Singh's point about inexperience and so on. But gaps can always be filled. And in our little country, we can find people with expertise on whose help we can rely to do things and get things done. We're heading into a critical period. We're heading into a critical period where as the government becomes scrutinized, this whole question of respect for divergent views will come to the fore. And it will constitute a test for the kind of regime that we have in place. So I would say that, and this question of leadership, it keeps dogging us in Grenada, because we are not planting ourselves in a field where we sink deep roots and we understand what the people require of the politicians. So there's a lot of work to do. And I believe as we head to 50 years of independence, we have to move the thing. We have to shift gears. All this political stuff and so on, gutter stuff and so on, ain't helpful. Some of them true, but how helpful are they? When the bigger issue before us is how do we stake out a new space where citizens of Grenada can breathe.
I think we lost William there again with his mark. But Michael, your thoughts are diversionary tactics by the administration?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily see it as diversionary tactics. I wouldn't really say that. What I would say to the Grenadian people is that you have to be patient. I agree fully with Kenny. A lot of the players are inexperienced, no work experience, no government experience, but they'll learn. The people voted for them to learn on the job, and they have to give them time to learn on the job. And because remember, we had no transition period. June 23rd, we had elections. As a matter of fact, the same night of the election, some of them take charge. But going back to what Willie said, Willie said some of it some of the things that happen, the players are not in government. But there's records, and we have to go back to the records and be kind to records. There's records. And I want to ask Willie, how about the personal guarantee that Dr. Mitchell gave January 12, 2001 in the Parliament of Grenada when he was caught red-handed, suspending Section 8 of the Finance and Audit Act and stuffing down millions of dollars in the pockets of his family in call center. How about the personal guarantee he made when he said, Mr. Speaker, it is a loan, it is a loan. Come March, the loan would be repaid. Recently, I heard this government talking about part of the successes that they were able to get Libya to forgive Grenada's debt, a debt that they gave to the PRG since in the 70s. But we were trying to get Libya to forgive us that debt. What happened to that $18 million plus the $4.5 million that was taken from taxpayers and pushed down the pockets of Dr. Mitchell and his children? That is not ancient. Go back to the Hansard of January 12, 2001. And if you can't get him for all the other wrong things that they did, like the $3 million US that was given to the Dutch company to solve the flooding problem in Grenville, or the $3 million US that went to the WTO to get the WTO to increase on the bond rate, that's not ancient. We could start an investigation there. The first NNP got into office, and we played mass, we played jab with the call center around Dr. Mitchell. They got into office. Had the previous government made any requests to Dr. Mitchell and his families to pay back these millions that he took from the treasury and put in their pockets? How could you say that that's ancient? It's in the books.
William, William, Baptiste is challenging the notion that you're saying that is ancient.
I'm going to respond to him. Yes. Thankfully. No, it is true. I don't think any of us who followed over the last 20, 25 years, there's any dispute in our minds regarding these, whether they are facts or those that are facts and those that are allegations. I'm saying to you, a judgment has to be made. How far do you go? The scope of the thing. Listen to me. To whom is justice owed? To whom is justice owed?
When his family is still alive?
Hold on. Because you see what's going to happen is that if we do that, there's going to be another ringing of the bell that says, oh, it's political. Oh, it's political. So is either justice or it's politics. Which is it? What do the people of Grenada need? And we have seen this people of Grenada, the electorate, vote in these men over and over, in a sense saying that we are not concerned, certainly not overly concerned. Do you realize that corruption was not an issue in this last campaign in Grenada? I did not hear the NDC on the campaign trail prosecute corruption. They may well have been afraid to go there. I don't know.
Or perhaps, William, the national community was just really turned off by briefcase, this briefcase, that briefcase, the other. It never worked for the NDC in the last, at least the last two election cycles before June 2022.
Stuff. It's true,
Yeah.
Michael. It's there. But how far do we go? Every and everything? Or do we say, listen, let us deal with a select bundle of stuff and let us put it in the hands of the forensic people? I don't believe it would make sense at all, my brother, for us to put everything in the wash and say investigate. But I would go for a situation where we narrow the scope and we have, I use your term, forensic experts and so on, do the thing and tell us what the findings are.
Kevin, if I may ask
corruption issue.
Yes. Let Michael finish, please. Let Michael finish. I'm sorry. Let William finish. Michael, let William finish.
So
yes.
Mike, 1 sec. This corruption issue. It's one of the enemies of the people. It's an enemy of development, and it expresses itself potently in the area of poverty. Why? Because millions and millions that would otherwise be needed and used to create employment for the working class and poor people, to do national projects that make sense, those monies go into private pockets. So it is a serious issue, and we must come to terms with it. We must deal with it decisively. Decisively.
Is it a systemic issue, though, William? Is it a systemic issue?
Absolutely systemic. Absolutely systemic. So that when we talk about corruption in this period, when the present regime raises that flag, I have gone on record as saying to them, listen, yeah, you raise the flag, but look at yourself and make sure you don't succumb to the enticements that are there. Michael knows it. The enticements are right. Mr. Lansing knows it also. So we have this thing in the politics. It has to do with power. It has to do with culture. Some things that we let go and we let it slide. We don't care, and so on and so on. So I've roughed it up, but let me smoothen it now, Mike. I don't go with a big bundle of everything. Let the authorities recommend to them a smaller bundle of stuff, put it in the hands. The example would stand. And in the context of creating new political relations in Grenada, because we need a thing. We can't go into the next 50 years with this type of politics. We cannot do that. The people of Grenada need better than that. So I'm at peace now. Thank you.
Okay, Michael, it's your opportunity to rebut.
But Willie, I am not asking to commingle all of the allegations that I've just laid out, because the NDC has more or less, the first NDC has more or less gave him a buy on that. So I'm not asking, I was talking about some of the things for references. But let us look at the $55 million that this potential investor left Grenada with. That's not ancient. And if we cannot go back to some of the things that happened in the past to come up with corrupt practices, how about getting him, Dr. Mitchell and his family, to pay back that loan? That loan is not ancient. The loan is on the books. How about getting him? You don't have to prosecute him. You don't have to prosecute him. You don't need no inquiry for that. That's a clear-cut case. He has admitted under pressure that, yes, my family is involved. Yes, I gave them the money. And yes, starting January 12, 2001, that money would be paid. But I want to make a point to you, Willie. This government did not campaign on corruption, but they got into office and immediately they jump on faith. They made a lot of suggestions about who owns security firms and all of that allegation that have yet to be substantiated. So though they did not campaign on corruption, but they are highlighting corrupt practices that took place, the passport and faith, another one. If you do not handle these matters in a case that would give the public the confidence that you are doing something about it, just like Dr. Mitchell came back after the NDC sat on all of this evidence and did nothing. NNP and Dr. Mitchell is not dead for no reason at all whatsoever. And at least we take that into consideration.
I agree with you.
Here is a man, one of the most wealthy men in the Caribbean.
That is true.
One of the men who have the most contacts with gangsters that are willing to spend any monies to see him back into office. So if we want to be naive and start saying that NNP is dead, 5 years is not 500 years. This new government must do everything in their power to ensure that you bring these things under control, to remove the demoralized state of the Grenadian people. Because every time you hear a story about faith, how much 6 million, and you hear about what, and nothing is happening to that, you are pouring gasoline on the fire. You are now resurrecting what should very well be the end of Dr. Mitchell, and he's not going away because he's seen light at the end of the tunnel. Because lest we forget, there's a lot of things that this government said that they would do, And with the turn of events and times, the war and the global situation, a lot of it may not materialize. And the people of Grenada have to be patient and understanding and give them a chance to settle in and do the best that they can under difficult times, because they would be under pressure. The pension for one. I heard pension reform. And as Willie and Kenny know, the pension is nailed into the Constitution. So talking about pension reform, you must touch the Constitution. You have to look at Constitution reform, because pension and pension reform and constitutional reform is directly proportional to each other. So some of these challenges that they face ahead, they may stumble, but we have to give them a chance to succeed, and we have to help them succeed. And the fact that they're young, we know they're young, they're inexperienced, they would learn on the job. And like any apprentice, when you put an apprentice to do professional job, there will be mistakes, and we have to learn to live with that mistake. And we cannot nitpick with every little thing. The question of somebody going into a police station and demanding somebody free, that may be exaggerated. Every parliamentarian, as Kenny could spell out, whether it's a death in your family may be in trouble, a bank statement for somebody going away, your house leaking, your grandmother, your great-grandmother died, they turn to the politician. And depending on that supporter, how important that supporter is to you, you may be called upon to go and bail that person and so on. So all of this here, that is exaggeration. Will wear out and they will settle down. Give them time.
Absolutely. Now, Mr. Baptiste, I'm seeing some comments here that perhaps I should not have raised this because I'm giving credence. The Bubb Report, and for those comments for viewers who are offended by the fact that I raised those issues, that is what we do here. We ventilate issues that both sides raise. So that's all I would say on that. But thanks for responding to that. Folks, we have said a lot here. This is a very interesting discourse. And to William, your point about systemic issues in the intro to this segment, I talked about the Squandermania era. And I'm saying to myself, what have we learned from history in terms of impropriety and misappropriation of government funds? Have we learned anything? Are we using history as a guide so as to ensure that we have those guardrails that would prevent us from reinvent or sort of making those mistakes?
See, Kellen, the thing that defeats us repeatedly is no longer knowledge or competence or qualification. The thing that defeats us now consistently is character. Character. So we need to be looking at this issue of character with respect to leadership. With respect to leadership. And that is one of the mandates of our independence challenge. And if we keep electing leaders who, serious character flaws and so on, what results are they going to produce for the people? So that is the crux of the problem. There are serious character issues, and folks get involved in the politics, and money takes over character, and money feeds into relationships, and money feeds into votes, and you understand what is happening. At the end of the day, some of us ring the corruption bell. Yeah, we ring it. Lots of others discount it and disregard it. So we need to be moving towards, in my view, a new type of politics. And do you realize that the young people today ain't hung up on political party? They ain't hung up on political party, because, they live in a selfie culture. They are prepared to pair in a relationship in this context with Deacon Mitchell. It's not love of NDC. So we need to explore now the new dimensions of the political reality that's on our hands, so that we could understand and this how we move forward responsibly into the next 50 years of our independence. So we need to cut a lot of the fluff talk. When we talk in transformation agenda, we must understand that this is not just about putting some programs down and say these are the 6 or 7 programs. Yeah, that's fine. Fundamentally, we need to be talking about life in communities, how people live, how we relate to one another, how we feel about our country. We need that. In other words, the transformation, if it is focused on economic issues, is going to leave the society behind. And when you leave the society behind, you have not transformed anything. You have a problem on your hands. So I have rung that bell before, that the regime needs to look more broadly at this question of transformation. It is not about some program, a couple of sectors that you say you want to do this and that, and that's fine. But what are we going to do about the Grenadian society? What are we going to do about the political business? What are we going to do about our constitution? We need to be working these things simultaneously for us to get to some point that makes sense for all of us and for our grandchildren and children. Otherwise, trouble.
And on that note, we have to take a quick break, and then we will come back to wrap up this segment. Of course, the former MP Glennis Roberts, she's patiently waiting there in the wind. So, Mrs. Roberts, we will be with you shortly. But folks, we'll just take a quick break, and when we come back, we will take some closing comments from this very spirited panel this morning here on the Bubb Report. Please stand by. Why would we have ambassadors representing the state that do not understand clearly what their terms of reference are?
To the cards that I have drawn that I am the minister at this point in time. And for members of the public...
But you're also a servant of the people. The unions are not threatening to withdraw their labor, and neither are they threatening to shut the country down, as you did.
I think your summarization of my position is highly inaccurate, and may I dare say a bit inflammatory.
The strategy did not work the last time for you. So what would make this?
Well, you're assuming that we're doing the same strategy.
Viewers and listeners, welcome back, and we would quickly get to some closing comments. Of course, there were so much more issues that we needed to ventilate on this segment that I believe we need to have a part 2 next week. We did not even talk about some of the other substantive issues that came up in the town hall, such as the budget. Health informed a major talking point there, promises to construct a new general hospital that would also involve systemic changes to the healthcare system in the country. We've had the Prime Minister, of course, declaring what the budgetary agenda would look like for the next year, with health being one of the primary focus areas for this budgetary period. But we want to get to some closing comments, and at this point, I wish to invite Mr. Lal Singh to offer some closing comments for this segment. Mr. Lal Singh, over to you.
I will. I want to agree with William on what he said about transformation and what needs to be done. I think he was very much on point, because we want to see true transformation taken in the country. We want to see people change their culture in a more positive way. So I think he was very much on point in terms of what is expected in this transformation, and not just old talk. Now, we have to understand that this government, we must give them the fullest support. If they fail, we fail. If they succeed, we all succeed. Problem here is that, as said before, corruption was not an issue in the campaign. And I've said before, the election results baffled everybody. And that is only because PM Dickon Mitchell said he will pay the pensions. And that changed the entire political landscape for the election. The pension was the issue that pushed NDC the government and similarly get NNP out of government. So none of them expected it, but this was the issue that PM Dickon Mitchell took, and he brought him victory. We congratulate them and we want them to succeed. We want true transformation to take place, but I know it is a long road. It's a long road for them to get it done. There is an issue I raised with a minister recently, and I said, do you know, I believe quite honestly the government made a mistake by making petrol in Grenada duty-free. I say you don't make something like petrol duty-free. People grown accustomed to the $15. Obviously, Dr. Kit Mitchell abused it and he overcharged us in petrol tax. Now we have gone from one extreme to the next. Now we pay no taxes on petrol. I believe it's an error by this present government, and I hope it will not create any adverse economic impact for them to be corrected later on. No, you know, they could have said, let's remove taxes on rice, you know, rather than removing taxes on petrol. So I said so to a minister that you have to be very careful when you're taking decisions as a new government, because there's an unwritten rule that you must follow. You take all your tough decisions in government and parliament in the first 2 years. And by the third year, you should see the benefits coming to the public from your transformation and the decisions you take in the first 2 years. So you don't use the first 2 years to give away too much, but you use the first 2 years to put a system in place that will pay off by the third year, fourth year, and the election year.
All right, Mr. Lal Singh, thank you for that. I would go over to Mr. Joseph. Mr. Joseph, for some closing comments from you.
Yes, thank you so much, and thanks to my colleague panelists. I would say in closing that, you know, there is so much that Grenadians expect of this new administration. I am sure that they expect a lot themselves. We would hope that the government listens to public voices. We heard some views this morning. People are trading views elsewhere on different platforms. What is the mechanism by which the regime is paying attention to and considering public voices? The scrutiny is going to deepen. Divergent voices will emerge. What are we going to do? How are they going to handle those things in a period where...
I want you to repeat that, Mr. Joseph, that divergent voices will emerge.
Yes.
Okay.
Divergent
all right.
voices
I'm asking you to repeat that. I'm asking you to repeat that for a specific reason. But
I suspect that. Divergent voices are going to be heard, and sounded, and is going to increase. The issue is how the regime manages that. Do we take a sledgehammer and we criticize those who don't share your perspective, or do we appreciate that this is one way of growing and deepening and strengthening the Grenadian democracy? In other words, there is a spirit that is needed. It's not in any textbook. There is a new spirit that is needed in the politics for us to make sense as we step into the next 50 years. And there's an opportunity in the hands of the new administration. It will not, that opportunity will not be cashed in if they close the thing and think it's all about themselves in the NDC party. It is not. That would be a massive mistake. It is about a lot of others of us who are not in party, but we are patriotic citizens of Grenada. And we need to have a platform. We need to have mechanisms for us all to contribute to the development of Grenada, not by any tokenism and so on, but in serious and responsible ways that help us to shift the thing and to begin to shape the future. That transformation agenda talk is a great opportunity, but we're going to lose the great opportunity if we do it wrong. So that's where I stand. And I thank you so much. And I thank my colleagues on the panel. And I thank the listening audience.
Mr. Joseph, I don't know, did we get to desserts yet? It's so fast. I can't believe we skipped the main course, Michael. We skipped the main course.
No, I've taken off the bib.
Mr. Baptiste, over to you for some closing comments. And before I do, you and I, we lost a dear cousin of ours, Mr. Baptiste. Mr. Baptiste, not a lot of people know this, but we are actually related. You are a St. David's man originally from Pomrose. You are a Kingston, which is the maternal matrilineal family there. So we claim you in Pomrose, St. David's, okay? Even though St. Andrews has been your home, Munich and that community has been your home, you are a St. David's man.
Well, I'm no longer sick in public office, so it's okay to claim me. If I was, I would say no. I'd rather link to St. Andrews, but
you know, he can't win St. David's now.
Oh yes,
absolutely. Michael, over to you.
Well, first I want to say how grateful I am to be on this program with distinguished panelists. Kenny Lal Singh is a man that I have a lot of respect for as a politician, a businessman, and a patriot, and I hold him in very high esteem in the community. Mr. Joseph, of course, and I said it before and I'll say it again, he is one of the best PS that ever graced the service. He's knowledgeable of the service, and he knows it inside out, and I hope that government is using the wealth of knowledge that he have to place him in some place where he can be of continuous service to the country. In terms of the transformational agenda, that's a daunting task that they have given themselves. They must take into consideration that prior to June 24th, there's a mountain of issues, social and economic issues that are affecting our tri-island state. They have not yet addressed that. The issue of the collapse of the rural economy, the issue of high unemployment and hopelessness among our young people that have not yet been dealt with. And
Mr. Baptiste, I'm sorry, but they have not been there for 6 months.
No. I said they have not yet been dealt with.
Okay, right, yes. Okay. You're not attributing that to the NDC.
No.
Fair enough.
And the collapse,
that's fair.
The collapse of the rural economy.
Okay.
In other words, Grenada's problems are now in the laps. You can't pass the ball anyway. The buck stops here. And I think the public should be patient. The Grenadian people have to be patient. The LNP have built up an institution, a very negative one, where they created a state of poverty, and they have developed a system where they service that poverty. It would be difficult to transform that in 5 years. I want to wish the government well. I think in the first 100 days they have signaled that they are willing to, that they're hearing the cry of the people and they are taking steps to alleviate some of the suffering of the people. I think reducing on the freight on the freight charges at the port. Kenny said they should remove it on rice, but I said they had removed the charges on the freight. They have gone back to the 219 cost. And I think the merchants should pass along that savings to the public. I don't know how that is done. I don't know if there are price control officers out there, because you just cannot reduce it and expect automatically that pass along to the customer. I think the Prime Minister is sincere. I think he's doing a good job. He has his hands full. We have to give him the support. We have to give him the support. We have to pray, and we have to ask the nation to be patient. The health situation is alarming. The talk of a new hospital, yes, while that's welcome, but people are dying into the hospital. I can speak of the death of my own daughter who died in hospital as a result of negligence. I think there are some burning issues that he has to put his hands on, put the handle on it, because overlooking your shoulder is a well-financed NNP machinery. And time flies, trust me. And you need to pay particular attention to these issues that I've just outlined. The health situation, the collapse of the rural economy, high unemployment and hopelessness among our people. Those are issues that is in your lap now. They're your issues now. And you and your surrogates have to be more tolerant to to opposing views. It's not every time someone critique the government that they're supporting NNP. I think we did so in 2008 when we sit back and said nothing for fear of giving support to the opposition at the time. The time has come now where we must cheer them on, but wherever they falter, we should come forward and call them up. But by and large, I think the plans are good. His intention is good, and we must give them time. There were no transition period. He was not a politician. His ministers were not politicians. Most of them have no experience, and you expect some rookie mistakes like all rookies do. It's a learning process for them. It's just unfortunate that they are learning in critical time. So my unwavering support.
All right, Mr. Baptiste, thank you so much. Panelists, thank you so much. Mr. William Joseph, thank you. I know that you're traveling, so I appreciate the time you've taken to spend with us. Of course, I'm sure you could not miss this lovely dinner with your friend Michael, as well as Mr. Lal Singh. Mr. Lal Singh, we would like to invite you officially to be part of this small dinner club that we have here. For future reference.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Absolutely. And of course, we have another ex-parliamentarian here. Of course, so we have 3 parliamentarians on today. That's Ms. Glennis Roberts, who will be coming up next. Of course, all of you are part of the ex-parliamentarians club. So
and that's an elite group, you know. Those are parliamentarians that served more than 2 terms, huh?
That's right. That is true. You guys serve more than 2 terms, so there is that. True. All right, panel. I believe we really enjoyed this discourse with you gentlemen. It's been such a joy to have all of you here this morning, and thank you for the morsels of knowledge you were able to share with our viewing and listening public. Viewers, we would take one quick break, and then we will come back with the former Member of Parliament for the South St. George constituency, Mrs. Glennis Roberts. Please stand by. Why would we have ambassadors representing the state that do not understand clearly what their terms of reference are?
To the cards that I have drawn that I am the minister at this point in time. And for members of the public...
But you're also a servant of the people. The unions are not threatening to withdraw their labor, and neither are they threatening to shut the country down, as you did.
I think your summarization of my position is highly inaccurate, and may I dare say a bit inflammatory.
The strategy did not work the last time for you. So what would make this?
Well, you're assuming that we're doing the same strategy.
And welcome back, folks. We are now joined by Mrs. Glennis Roberts, who will talk on the Judy Benoa ruling that was handed down recently by the OECS Court of Appeal. And then we will get into a conversation about the late Sister Gabrielle Mason of Munich St. Andrew, who was also the principal of the St. Joseph's Convent, St. George's. Of course, Glennis Roberts is a past student of the St. Joseph's Convent, and she remembers fondly her former principal. So, Mrs. Roberts, we want to give you this time, of course, take this time to welcome you to the Bubb Report.
Thank you very much, Kellon, for inviting me to your program. I also want to say congratulations to Brigadier General Jennifer Marast. It was so refreshing to hear of, a woman and Grenadian roots doing so well. And as she rightly said, she needs to be invited to Grenada. So I am inviting her to Grenada. First invitation.
Absolutely.
To come to Grenada and share your knowledge, share the know-how, how we can make a change.
For sure. Now let's get on
and it
with
was an interesting. Go ahead.
Yes, react to what you heard, the panel segment.
It was an eye-opener to a lot of things. And what was refreshing to hear is that we need to change the mode of operating outside of the partisan way. And hence the reason enough was found. So this transformation started over 10 years ago, but were we willing to accept it? Because we have a society where we have two main parties playing. And because of these two main parties, we don't see anybody else as being an alternative to help in the development of the country. So it's also refreshing to hear it from William Joseph, because as everyone knows, he was part of the NDC construct when I got into it. In actual fact, when I started my discourse, because I did not start as a politician per se, he was the one I met with himself and what's his name? Bless his soul. Asquith Duncan. They drilled me on tourism. Yes, because I at the time when we go in opposition, I shadowed tourism, so they were the ones helping me with that, and I'm utterly grateful. But this is what Grenada needs. The time has come for us to stop looking at people as just, this is a political figure. This is someone that can develop your country. Let's work. Because to be honest, when you go to the polling booth, you do not know, nobody know who votes for who, because it's you alone. So half the time the people that say to you, I support you, don't vote for you. There are many people who said to me before, Glennis, I didn't really vote for your party. I voted for you. So the time has come for that. And I must say that we need to give the government, and we must also remember that government is all of us. It's not party. Government is us, the people. We are just the stewards. The politicians are just the stewards to use the funds. So it doesn't matter who, where, you need to work for that. And I also want to track back on a little instance that happened when I was Minister of Labor. And I remember there was one gentleman who was an excellent consultant to labor. And I brought his contract for renewal, and the question was asked, do you know this guy? I said, did you know what he did during the election campaign? I said, no. They said, well, he was on the political platform against Nas. I said, did Nas win or lose? He won. I said, by how much? By a lot. I said, well, he wasn't a factor on the campaign, but he was a factor in my ministry. He's an excellent consultant to labor. And that was Mr. Anselm de Burgh. And I can tell you, in 2008, when we just won, Chester Humphrey nearly killed me with labor disputes. And every time, Mr. de Burgh was the man to say, Minister, take a 5 minutes. And we were able to solve the problem. And I'm saying all of that to say, I'm endorsing the position that William now holds, that we all have a part to play, whether we support the pink party or the yellow party or the green party. Thank you.
Absolutely. Now, Mrs. Roberts, let us talk about The Judy Benoa ruling, of course, that came down the pike. The court found that she was unconstitutionally removed. Now, in transcripts on the case, in case transcripts, it does talk about the two issues that led to at least to her dismissal by the Governor General. The first of which being her refusal to implement a digital system in select parliamentary elections offices across the country. But the second had to do with a dispute over your party symbol. That party symbol of the National United Front, of being the family that was arbitrarily selected to be the dove, I believe it was, by the parliamentary elections office at the time, of which Judy Benoa was the head of the parliamentary elections office. I want you to react to the ruling as you've had an opportunity to observe and read on it.
Well, the thing is, the case was brought, there was a ruling, and as I said, we have to accept the ruling. However, I think we have to remember what was the reason for the complaint. And to me, Miss Benoa acted out of line in changing our party symbol from the family to the dove. And if I can add in here, reason we chose the family is because a decade ago, we saw that family was necessary to build strong communities and bring a strong country. So, and it also went back to that transformation, meaning that we use different people for different things. So, for example, I was part of a party construct. I was thrown out, deemed a rebel. I was never given a chance to answer, is this true? Is this not true? I accepted it and I moved on, noting some of us that we needed a new construct. Because we have to understand that we are all individuals. And even if we go into a party construct and we don't know each other and understand each other, not all the time it will work to our benefits. And I think that is what we found with the NDC. It was fragments off and fragments off. So we thought, okay, let's start a new party. So with that, we thought maybe we'll get a chance to have 1 or 2 seats in the parliament and keep that voice going. And I believe the maturity will come with politics when, if 2 people of this party would have won, 1 person from that party, they can join the government. The government can be so bold as to say, listen, Miss Jane, you have won your seat, not on my party's ticket, but I want to invite you to be part of my government. And I think this is where we need to go, so that, because as I said, government is for all of us. And not because you're not the majority, it doesn't mean that you cannot give a valid contribution towards nation building. So with that, I thought it was something to complain about. So I did complain to the Governor General's office, as well as when the election observers came, that's the OAS, I did mention to them, because I think it was utterly unfair to us. We campaigned on the family, and then weeks before you change it to a dove. I don't think that was right at all. And not that the reason cited was not even one that's, you can't find a symbol, because we had a symbol. We had it on our T-shirts going around for the period. So I think she erred, and I think we should commend the Governor General for taking that stand, because the Constitution, our motto, stands for justice for all. And sometimes, because we have our own partisan way, we believe that, oh, this doesn't make sense, but we need to be just to everyone. That is what it calls for, justice for all. And I believe our political party, go ahead.
Are you then suggesting that you don't necessarily agree with the ruling of the court? That you believe that the Governor General was right to unilaterally dismiss Ms. Benoa without due process in the way that it was done?
Well, the thing about it is, when you listen to remember, the post of supervisor of election is not one that's guarded by the Public Service Commission. So I don't think there is any rule broken, because it is an appointment to a position to serve for a period. Because if we look back in 2008, when we got into office, NDC at the time, and the Governor General changed, at the time, deceased, bless his soul, Sir Carlisle Glean and Nordica McIntyre, bless her soul, she's also deceased. She was removed from the position, and with that, she had to move. She didn't complain.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm saying all of that to say, Kellon, that the Governor General, in her judgment, because remember, we're all individuals, in her judgment, she thought this was enough to say, well, okay, I have to relieve you from the position. In the further case that I slighted, which is with the former Governor General and Miss McIntyre, she just took her dismissal or removal quietly. So there is no, I don't know all the ins and outs of the public service, as I said, because as somebody rightfully noted earlier, when you enter government, it's a learning curve. You're learning. When you first step in, the first day I went into government was the first day I went into government. I didn't work in government before, so I had to learn on the way. And as was said before, there are a lot of excellent civil servants who continue to work diligently. And what we also forget as politicians is that they too have a right to support who they have to support. But most times they get chided for their political suasion when the Constitution gives you that right.
Let us segue into, thank you for that. Let us segue into your reflection on the late Sister Gabrielle Mason. We were supposed to have you here last week, but it's good that you can now talk to us about your former principal and educator and, of course, mentor on her passing.
Sister Gabrielle. Kellon, when Sister Gabrielle came into the convent in the 70s, I think I was in Form 4. So I started in 74, so that's about 78, 77, 78. She came in as a history teacher. But it was during the time of the revolution when we had all the, 74, Bloody Monday, and always the New Jewel movement. And I think in the whole Caribbean, the Black Power movement was really high. And Sister came in, the way she walked with that sense of, I am here. And she did not start as my principal, but the principal then was Sister Philomena. Sister Philomena Fletcher was our principal, but Sister came in as a teacher. And we called her the Black Power Nun. This is our Black Power Nun, because the way she spoke to us at the assembly, the way she brought us in sync with local history and Caribbean history, it was out of this world. And we became very close when I became a parent, and I had to start, doing duties in school as a parent, as part of the PTA. She wanted to form an executive. She wanted people to volunteer, but at the time I was very busy traveling, with my prior job. So I said, when she called she called one of my friends named Shoma. Shoma said, "Sister, I'm busy." She said, "People like you I'm looking for." She said, "Is that Glennis in the back?" I said, "Yes, sister, but I have the same reason for Shoma." She said, "That's the people." She said, "Only busy people get things done. Only busy people get things done." And Kellon, to today, I stand by that. Busy people get things done. And then further on, she continued. Then my children, my daughters all went to the convent, and she was that force. She was the one that encouraged us to give back to the institution. I think, if I don't if I remember correctly, they used to call her the begging nun because she asked for everything. It is to repair the court, to do this, to do that. I remembered we celebrated, was it 125 years or 150 years? And it was a lot of, pomp, things that for my age at the time was all, news to me. But she was that person that gave us that sense of giving back, being committed to. And then she did a book. And part of that book was Bloom Where You're Planted. So those two things stuck with me up to today, because that Bloom Where You're Planted worked so well with me when I was in government. Every year I was moved to a new ministry, and that was resonating in my head. Bloom where you're planted. So I tried my best in labor. I tried my best in social development. I tried my best in tourism and civil aviation. I tried my best back in labor. I tried my best back in the environment and foreign trade. And I also, even now, when I was in the Senate, I had that opportunity to kind of be like the opposition leader in the Senate because there was no opposition. I tried my best there as well. So that bloom where you planted, she planted that seed in me personally. And I guess my children will say the same, because they too was part of her leadership. So to the St. Joseph's Clooney sisters, we all grieve with you. Sister Gabrielle left a very strong mark in most of our lives. And Kellon, I must tell you that I was not part of what you call the Bride Club in the convent. I was like, let's say, an insignificant child, and not because I was treated that way, but because I was kind of subdued. I have to tell my story one day. I tell it sometimes because just in 2020, we were going to celebrate we started another celebration in the fives. I think it's 75 years. And I was invited to the assembly to give my story as a student up to being a parliamentarian. And it was a nice experience to share with the students my journey as a student. Because when I left the convent, and to this day, I am not one of those who can say that, okay, I have English and math, and I have this amount of A levels and stuff. I was one of those fortunate ones who never applied for a job up to today and has done well. And with that building of confidence within the walls of St. Joseph's Convent, those are the things that have bolstered me to where I am today. Although at the time within the walls, I was not one of those that debated or did anything significant, nor even play netball for the team. I couldn't even make the team because we had one of Miss Pilgrim. If you can't do your schoolwork, don't come on the court. And I wasn't one of the brightest ones. So I was just a spectator in netball playing for my form, but not going on to the school team. So I'm saying all of that to say that Sister Gabrielle and the Sisters of Clooney would have done excellent work in molding thousands of us. And I want to appeal to my fellow alumni out there to let's continue to support the school in every little way that we can, so that other lives will be impacted. The dynamics of school in the 70s and now is totally different, because when we went to school, it was more sisters teaching us than lay people. Now this has reversed a little bit. You hardly have the sisters in the school. However, those of us who would have gotten that teaching should hold on to it and impart our knowledge and be caring and compassionate. Sister was also an compassionate nun. She also placed herself in parents' position. What would I do if this is my child? She was an excellent source of inspiration to a lot of us.
Glennis, very profound reflection there on the late Sister Gabrielle Mason, who was not only an educator, but she was a nurturer, a mentor, a counselor, a writer, a poet, so many hats that she wore, and certainly one of the great Grenadian educators of
Yes.
the 20th and early 21st centuries. So we thank you for your reflection, and we thank you for reacting to the Judy Benoa ruling that was released by the court recently. So thank you again, Mrs. Roberts. So we hope to have you back on the program. I believe this is the very first time you appeared on the Bubb Report, so certainly, barring better technical conditions, we're hoping to have you back to tell your story. Yes, you said you want to
No
tell that
problem.
story. So
Yes,
please,
that story
come on
needs
the
to be-
Bubb Report and
yes.
tell that story.
I want to write a book. You know, I did a piece on Sister Gabrielle, and I sent to my son, and he said, because I have a son that's a teacher at PBC, and he says, Mom, you must write a book. I'm telling you, you must write a book. You have a lot of things to share.
Yeah.
But I must confess, I'm not a reader. I don't like to read. But if it is that I should do it, I think it's something I should pursue. But I want to also say thanks to my family. I have a wonderful bunch of children in my son, Gavin, Carla, Terry, Cecile. I now have 6 grandsons and 1 granddaughter. So it's a journey of life that I'm happy to be on. And I want to thank all those who have contributed in some way or the other to the success I have made over the years. Some people may not have agreed with my decisions, but I live by them and take the consequences, whether it's good or bad.
Absolutely. Mrs. Glennis Roberts, former Member of Parliament for the constituency of South St. George, former Minister of Government under the previous iteration of the National Democratic Congress, political leader of the National United Front. She's involved in netball, involved in community service. She wears many hats, works at the Mongava Resource Center down there in Montu as well, doing community service there with that organization. So we thank her for being our last guest on the program. Viewers and listeners, on behalf of the producers of the Bubb Report, I am your humble servant, Dr. Kellen Bubb, wishing everyone a fun, safe, and productive week ahead. Bye-bye.